Hi, everyone. I appreciate you all being here today, and I hope that you hear something that is both interesting and useful, preferably both. I know this isn't a common cybersecurity topic, but it's something that I care about. So a short introduction about me, if I can, there we go. So my name is Marina, and I'm a digital forensics investigator and incident responder at a biotech company headquartered in Amsterdam. Nothing I'm talking about today is related to my work. This is just something I do in my free time because I like it, which should tell you something about the state of my social life. But if I do happen to have time for hobbies, I usually spend it stalking my neighbor's cats because my apartment is too small to have one, or kickboxing. So the first, all right, 2 screens, this is fun. So to be honest, I did have some trouble with this presentation because there are so many cybersecurity risks that if I were to just go and kind of contextualize and explain them all, it would take over an hour, which we don't have, and I wouldn't be able to listen to that presentation either. But if I were to just give you a summary, that would end up with me reading you a list off of a slide, and you would be sitting in the audience thinking, this could have been an email. So what I'm going to do instead is just look at 2 threads. I'm going to start with defining smart cities as I'm using it today, and then I'm going to walk you through sort of 2 possible attack paths, as well as examples of things that have already happened. And my goal is to show you the interconnected and overlapping risks that smart cities face that we don't address enough. So, smart cities. I know we don't like raising our hands, but has everyone heard the term smart city? All right, cool. Well, there are a couple of definitions. The original term was intelligent cities, but that one was scrapped because the marketing department thought that intelligent seemed elitist, so they moved to smart, which is more user-focused and user-friendly. So the intelligent definition, it focused very much on technology, but not enough on people, in my opinion. And then you also have definitions that focus on the community and social and political aspects of smart cities, but again, in my opinion, those don't focus enough on the impact and consequences of technology. So I made my own, which is that a smart city is an urban territory that uses ubiquitous IT and OT to digitize, as well as stakeholder partnerships, to digitize and improve its running, its efficiency. So the reason that this definition is so broad is because smart cities are where a lot of IT and OT overlaps. And we also have the competing stakeholders that bring their own assets to smart cities. So a risk that affects one of them can affect them all. Now, I know this is a cybersecurity conference, but I want us to start with a creative exercise. So imagine for a moment that you're a terrorist. Bear with me. Imagine your name is Pete. I don't know. So imagine you're a terrorist named Pete, and you want to launch an attack on Amsterdam because you just really hate tulips. So if you're Pete the terrorist and you're planning an attack on Amsterdam, what kind of information do you think you would need? What would be most helpful? Is it A, the MAC addresses and movement of every single smartphone in an area? Is it the name and contact information of every single Dutch police officer, including those undercover? Or is it C, the quality and location of every underground cable and the metro and Amsterdam rail lines in the city? Well, the good news is you have option D, which is all of the above. And this is the first thread that I want to pull on, which is data. Smart cities run on data of all kinds, collected by many different parties, processed by many different parties, and also stored in different places. Amsterdam, where I live, has a long-running open data project. It has everything you might want to know about a city, including things that you probably didn't. So for instance, you can find every single bridge. They're all tagged and registered, and there's over 1,000 of them. Apparently, you can also find every tree. Not sure why you would need to do that. If you're a history buff, you can see the location of every single bomb that was dropped during World War II. And then we've got useful stuff. So we have, for example, the parking availability in real time for locations and garages. You also have public transportation information. You've got housing and construction plans, and these are the things that you would use in a smart city application or for your own business and personal decision making. But then we have things that, if you have a hacker mindset, raise some eyebrows. So for example, you can find within each block of the city what kinds of underground cables there are, how long they are, what's the quantity and quality of them, and you can also see a map that highlights every single metro and rail section, which includes the length, where they stop and start, all the switches, all the intersections. And as a regular citizen, there's no need for me to know any of that. It's just available all the time. And you could probably request it if you're doing a construction project or you're an engineer, but a motivated threat actor could probably use that information in a variety of creative ways. And this idea of misuse isn't purely theoretical. In the 2010s, Amsterdam held an app development competition where developers could use this information, this open data, to build applications to improve the lives of residents and citizens. So someone did, useful things like a public toilet finder, but then someone else triangulated the data of street lighting, the most expensive houses, and their distance from police stations to build an app that would show you the best places to rob. It's been scrubbed from the internet, so don't try looking for it. But these are just a few data points, and there's so much more information available. And Pete, the terrorist, can misuse this data, as we've already seen. But what about stuff that isn't open to the public, like information about people, for instance? Last September, the Dutch police was hacked by an identified but undisclosed nation-state actor. This isn't a purely municipal or city issue, because in the Netherlands, the Dutch police is nationally managed, and then they have stations in all the different cities. So this was a sort of global hack. But it's still a smart city issue, because including in Amsterdam, there have been a lot of projects focusing on the security and safety of citizens that use IoT, like crowd and device tracking. They use CCTV footage. They use police databases. They send real-time information and data analyses to the police so that then they can go more quickly respond to crimes. So there is a strong connection there. And we don't know if the nation-state actor was a friend of Pete's, but if one group could do it, they stole all the Outlook data for every single Dutch police employee, including, like I said, undercover officers, but also Dutch government employees from different agencies who just cooperated with the police. Then it's really likely that someone else can do that too and take something else as well. But Pete, the terrorist, doesn't even necessarily need to hack an IT system himself to get something useful. He could also just wait for that information to be leaked due to a poorly configured database, or bad access control policies, or even an inside threat, all of which happened during COVID. So in one case, a couple of employees who had access to the Dutch corona testing and tracking system knowingly they leaked and sold the information of thousands of Dutch people that were registered there. In another case, an access control misconfiguration at a different municipal health service ended up with every employee in the entire company having access to every record of every person in the database. That's not great. Linda from HR doesn't need to know what my COVID test is. And then someone else, a security researcher, discovered a database of a testing company, this private company, it was on the internet, there was no password, and it contained the data of over 1 million people, not just Dutch people, but also tourists and visitors as well. And after being notified, it took them 3 weeks to take it down, and it was just chilling. So these were all insider threats, either accidental or malicious. No outside help needed. Pete could theoretically just, take his Bitcoin wallet and go online shopping on dark web breach forums. And if we take all of these actual incidents and, potential techniques and tactics, and then we combine that with the complication of data ownership issues and different stakeholders, we get another, just one, attack path with more invasive consequences. So there's a company in the Netherlands that manages several thousand car parks, tens of thousands of traffic lights, smart ones, and more than 500,000 smart lamp posts all across the Netherlands. Now, it sold these devices to the cities. So the municipalities own the hardware, but they don't own the data, which is owned by the company and is about city residents and their movements. Oftentimes, the city doesn't even get access to the data because the company owns it and doesn't want to share for competitive reasons. These traffic sensors and smart lampposts can do things like track your phone's MAC address, even if you're not connected to city Wi-Fi. No one's asked or warned about this, it just happens. If you happen to have Wi-Fi enabled, your phone will just send out bursts of packets and it'll be collected by these smart lampposts. That data is then collected and stored by this private company, and because it owns it, it could theoretically, sell it to third-party advertisers or data brokers, or even Pete the terrorist masquerading as one of them. Yes, it's anonymized, but if you take that and you can combine that data with all of these linked databases and others, then it's really arbitrary to de-anonymize. So that's a possible attack path, and it's just one. And that's the problem, is that there's much more open data. There are many more leaks of private and public organizations. And it's, you just spend a few hours thinking about all the ways you can abuse that. And if you're, well-funded, like Pete happens to be, there's a lot that you can do with that. And it's just one possible way. I'm really thirsty, and I left my water bottle. This would have been a good point. I don't know what happened here. I'm missing a few slides, but okay, cool. We're just rolling with it. So that's another thing that Pete the terrorist could abuse is water. Oh Lord, sorry about that, guys. I don't know what happened here. But yeah, in an OT environment, at the lowest level, you have sensors and you have actuators. And sensors are the things that they passively monitor things, and they send all sorts of data to something else that then sends it on forwards. And there's more complicated layers on top of that. But sensors and actuators are the things that actually interact with an industrial process or environment. So an actuator, a sensor in a water management system, for instance, will monitor the water pressure, water temperature, quality, whereas an actuator is the thing that does stuff. So it will, in a parking garage, for example, it will raise and lift the barrier, or in a water management system, it will open and close pipes, just as an example. And OT hardware is designed to be resilient and redundant. So it's supposed to run for 30 years without needing to be replaced and survive impact, temperature changes, physical damage. But this often means that critical facilities are running really old hardware that can't support software that is secure or reliable, because they just physically can't support it. So also due to low latency requirements, protocols used in industrial control environments often use plain text communications, and those can be eavesdropped, literally dropped, or even modified in transit. And within a closed bubble, this is fine, but the problem is that smart cities like to create internet connections and external interfaces, and oh, thank you, very sweet. So suddenly, you have industrial devices that are finding themselves increasingly open to threats that IT devices face, but with even less protection. And vendors tend to be, as we've heard, vendors tend to be slow to respond to these vulnerabilities because it costs money to secure your hardware and software, and customers aren't really asking for it unless they themselves need to be compliant with standards or regulations that require it. So without staff at these facilities that are properly trained in security, glaring issues can go unnoticed for extended periods of time. For instance, in early 2021, Florida suffered a cyber attack on one of their, they've had many, but this was one on a water treatment plant where somebody discovered a long-forgotten TeamViewer installation and used it to change the sodium hydroxide levels in water. If you drink sodium hydroxide, you will die. Luckily, a plant employee noticed the on-screen activity, and he changed the levels, immediately stopped the attack. Everything was fine. But that initial access point was already there for 6 months, and if this weren't a script kiddie, but an advanced persistent threat, they could have done things like disable reporting, or reconfigured the network, or done something else to actually cause harm to people. As another example, Israel has suffered multiple really clearly politically motivated attacks over the years. Almost always, these are OT devices like human-machine interfaces or programmable logic controllers that are open to the internet using default passwords, sometimes even no passwords. And no one knows that this is an issue. Like these groups are undertrained, these facilities are underfunded, understaffed, so they're just there. And irrigation systems, that's this picture, were damaged by a politically motivated group. Sorry, pop-ups, gotta love them. And then there was a different, so this incident actually physically damaged irrigation systems. So farmers were no longer able to use them, and they had to manually water their crops. In another instance, this one was also stopped, but attackers tried to change chlorine levels. If you drink chlorine too, it's a gas, but you'll die, so don't do that either. This one was also stopped, so no one was hurt. But again, we have really two close calls on critical infrastructure that power smart cities. That's a focus of smart city projects. But so we've seen that Pete the terrorist has his pick of vulnerable devices that can be remotely accessed, but we just saw in the last thread that external threats aren't the only things that we have to worry about. And we had an incident in Amsterdam, almost exactly a year ago, actually, during Hurricane Kieran, where So some context, the Netherlands, like a good third of the country, should be completely underwater. Like where I live, Amsterdam is below sea level. So the Dutch have this really, really cool system of huge floodgates that open and close to keep the cities from drowning. And what happened was during Hurricane Kieran, an employee noticed that water levels were too high, and what happened was that a computer glitch turned the control for those floodgates from automatic to manual. So instead of the sensors detecting rising water levels, that being sent to actuators that would then close the gates themselves, they were waiting for human input. And this control center is miles away from Amsterdam, so nobody knew that this was an issue. But what ended up happening was after a few hours, someone noticed, they checked it out, they saw that the gates were wide open, and then they closed them. And by the time that was done, the water in the canals of the entire city had risen by over 30 centimeters, which is billions of extra liters of water. Again, this was a close call, and they've added some additional technical and human measures to improve monitoring and response. But if one guy hadn't noticed, where I live would have been totally flooded. And that's kind of scary. And the Netherlands is in a good position here because we have a lot of trained, educated cybersecurity staff. We've got a really strong community and presence there. Many of these other centers, they don't have the knowledge to be aware of these kinds of issues and then also do something about them. They're understaffed, underfunded. Sometimes they're blocked from the right information resources because of language barriers, or they just don't know where to look. And with the huge cybersecurity workforce gap, it's not going to be hard to find multiple weak links. And they're not prepared to deal with an advanced, persistent threat like Pete. And these examples, they're just the ones that we know about. There's probably others that aren't reported in our usual media sources or languages. There's probably others that just haven't been reported. And then there's still others that just haven't been noticed. So I didn't talk about the connection to smart wearables. I also didn't talk about internet-connected medical devices or the Wild West that is smart home technologies. I also didn't talk about all the IoT devices that you can find on Shodan, or how Chinese-sponsored attackers have regularly infiltrated US energy infrastructure and companies, or how significantly more people die in hospitals that are hit by ransomware. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to smart city and security. As you've seen, it's not just the vulnerabilities in individual devices or systems, but the interconnections between them. They can cause unexpected ripple effects. They can have unintended consequences. And threat actors like Pete the terrorist aside, there's so much potential for things to go wrong unintentionally that also have serious consequences. The whole point of smart cities is to make people's lives better. So we need to talk about these risks. We need to have skilled professionals that know how to build secure systems and keep them that way. We need to have people in discussions making decisions that understand these risks and also care about them. Because if we don't, we put people at risk. I don't want to just give you all insomnia about the impending apocalypse. I mean, maybe a little bit, but my point here is to bring awareness and also share some resources. So what can we do as end users of smart cities? Let me give you 3 starting points. The first is that you can talk to people, so friends, neighbors, countrymen, other work colleagues. You can reach out to your own city and ask them what they do if they have any problems If you do bug bounties, this might be a good chance to apply some pressure. If you have a social media presence, you could share incidents, vulnerabilities, and also helpful resources. And it's true that your sternly worded email to an IoT manufacturer about data security practices isn't going to radically change anything. But if we as a community do nothing, we will change nothing. We also have had efforts to sort of standardize smart city architectures and have some frameworks. So for instance, NIST and Friends have created technical guidelines for smart city implementations that look at the different sectors you'd find. You have the cybersecurity agencies of the Five Eyes nations. They've made some best practices for securing IT and OT, as well as their overlaps. And you've also got ENISA. They have a cool interactive risk assessment tool and IoT in Smart Cities best practices framework, and you can access that with an EU login. And lastly, if you want to learn about OT security, there are some great places to start. So CISA in the US has made a bunch of introductory ICS training available completely for free. You just sign up with a business or academic email. Dragos has an OT cert that shares different resources each month. And the legendary Robert M. Lee has a really great list. If you're going to photograph any QR code, do that one, because he's got a really great list of different resources, different trainings, conferences that you can attend and learn more about to get involved. So I don't have a social media or blog because I'm tired, but this is my LinkedIn. Now that I've had you scan some QR codes, you can reach out to me there. I will be very happy to answer messages, get connections, and please also find me afterwards if you want to talk more about this. I'd really love to connect, and yeah, I like talking about it. I like listening and learning about it, so please find me afterwards. With that, I'd like to end on this practical note by sharing some resources. I'd like to thank you for your attendance and your attention, and answer questions if there are any.